This video presents my reasons to believe that David Chalmers is overly pessimistic about the prospects for micro-idealism. He's written an invaluable taxonomy of various theories of idealism in a paper called Idealism and the Mind-Body Problem. This first appeared as Chapter 28 of the 2020 book, The Routledge Handbook of Panpsychism. As might be expected, for the most part, this taxonomy parallels that for panpsychism. It was later reprinted as Chapter 40 of the 2022 book, The Routledge Handbook of Idealism and Immaterialism. He performs another important service. He emphasizes that many variants of idealism are realistic. The mistaken notion that idealism is the antithesis of realism is widespread, even in reputable academic circles. David's definition of idealism is that the universe is fundamentally mental, or perhaps that all concrete facts are grounded in mental facts. He remarks that, as such, it is meant as a global metaphysical thesis, analogous to physicalism. His classification of different variants of idealism is made in terms of three factors. Factor 1, realist idealism versus anti-realist idealism. In realist idealism, the things we perceive are more than mere appearances. For example, Pan-Idealism, in which all fundamental microphysical entities are conscious subjects, is realist. All other variants of idealism are anti-realist. For example, Berkeley's idealism is anti-realist by this definition, although Berkeley himself would vehemently disagree. The second distinction concerns whether the fundamental mental states are held by a subject. If the answer is yes, we'll call the idealism subject involving. In other variants of idealism, the mental states might be held by some other sort of entity, or by no entity at all. Both of these latter David calls non-subject involving. In this video, we'll only be considering subject involving idealism. The final factor concerns ontology. In other words, what sort of minds constitute reality? David gives three general categories. In micro-idealism, all concrete facts are grounded in facts about the mental states of fundamental microscopic entities, such as quarks or photons. In macro-idealism, the mental states of humans and perhaps other macroscopic systems, for example dolphins, are fundamental. Moreover, all of reality is grounded in these states. In cosmic idealism, all concrete facts are grounded in facts about the mental states of a single cosmic entity, such as the universe as a whole, or perhaps a god. These ontologies can exist in combination. For example, Berkeley's idealism can be regarded as a type of macro-cosmic idealism, in which we are representative macro minds and God is the one cosmic mind. The type of idealism I wish to defend here is realist, subject involving, micro-idealism. I'll just call this micro-idealism for short. My own position, Pan-Idealism, can be regarded as a specific variant of micro-idealism, when this latter term is broadly construed. I'll explain this in a moment. But before discussing my position, David Chalmers gives his assessments of the advantages and disadvantages of micro-idealism.
For the most part, I'll be quoting him directly. First, the advantages. A major motive for micro-idealism is the same as that which motivates panpsychism. It is to conjoin the successes of science, the problem of consciousness, and the inscrutability of matter, with a desire to see consciousness closely integrated with the physical world and playing a causal role. But micro-idealism has further advantages, not shared with panpsychism. First, in holding that all fundamental properties are of the same kind, micro-idealism offers a simple and unified monistic view of nature. Second, micro-idealism yields a relatively comprehensible picture of fundamental reality, in that in principle we may be able to grasp the fundamental properties. Third, micro-idealism avoids the interaction problem of making sense of mental, non-mental interaction in favor of the arguably easier problem of mental-mental interaction. Taken together, these advantages are considerable. He also presents details of 4 difficulties or challenges that micro-idealism faces. He rates some of these as very serious. First, the challenge of space and time. How could micro-experiential properties ground spatio-temporal properties, since the latter seem to be essentially relational rather than monadic?
Second, the challenge of holism. How can global fields, for example, the wave function psi of the universe, be grounded in mental facts? Third, the challenge of causal and dispositional properties. How can these be grounded in mental facts?
Fourth, the combination problem. How do the micro-experiences of micro-subjects collectively constitute the macro-experiences of macro-subjects? These 4 challenges are taken from longer discussions. I'll show how the specifics of Pan-Idealism can cash out the advantages and go a long way towards meeting the challenges of micro-idealism. Recall that micro-idealism is the claim that all concrete facts are grounded in facts about the mental states of fundamental microscopic entities, such as quarks or photons. Pan-idealism is somewhat similar. It claims that all non-trivially entangled physical systems, irrespective of scale, are also fundamental entities. These include particles such as photons. It also includes atoms, molecules, rocks, cells, plants, and animals. According to Pan-Idealism, an entangled physical system is, in essence, one single entity. The important feature of entanglement is that this accords well with the holistic character of mind. If we disregard the mention of microscopic from the definition of micro-idealism, then the only difference between the 2 idealisms is about what counts as fundamental in the ontology of our universe. I claim that the word microscopic is unimportant and vague. Worse, it is a term from physics, thus undermining the purity of the idealist ontology. Instead, it is fundamentality that is crucial to micro-idealism. Understood in this broad sense, pan-idealism can be regarded as a special case of micro-idealism. When I want to use David's original definition, I'll say strict micro-idealism. The fundamental entities in either ontology are rather generously called minds. These can perceive the world, they have agency in order to avoid epiphenomenalism, they have memory sufficient to explain time, and a few complex entities will possess cognition. This last applies to Pan-Idealism alone, because in strict Micro-Idealism, complex entities aren't fundamental. The following sections show how Pan-Idealism can meet each of David Chalmers' 4 challenges in turn. The first challenge to Pan-Idealism is that of space and time. Recall that David Chalmers asks, how could micro-experiential properties ground spatio-temporal properties, since the latter seem to be essentially relational rather than monadic? For example, we seem to need 2 entities in order to describe the distance between them. And this distance isn't a property of either entity alone. An important hint is that each of us has zero knowledge of the physical world except through our individual percepts. Scientific cosmological models are derived by discussing and comparing our individual percepts. Given this narrow basis, a few minds on the third rock from the sun, over a negligible time span, such models are astonishingly accurate. The pan-idealist solution to this challenge is to define space-time as the optimal synthesis of structural information taken from the percepts of all minds. Of course, we don't have access to the percepts of all minds, but this doesn't invalidate the definition. We modestly accept that we aren't omniscient. Imagine a toy universe in the shape of a cube. The cube contains particles of 2 types. Particles I'll call wood make up the shape of the chair, and particles I'll call air surround the chair. We can even imagine that the particles are jiggling. Despite the evocative labels, particles, wood, air, and jiggling, this universe is merely a mathematical abstraction. Now suppose that we are physicalists, and that we are making the claim that this universe concretely or actually exists. In this and later pictures, I've highlighted in yellow everything that concretely exists in the ontological base. The question arises, how does this supposedly concretely existing universe differ from its abstract mathematical model? Upon reflection, the answer is not at all. And this is one good reason for rejecting standard physicalism. This motivates panpsychism, the position that every entity that concretely exists possesses at least some mental properties. These properties include perception, agency, memory, and cognition. Very few entities will possess the latter. The percepts of a few of the multitude of air particles are sketched below. These percepts are not marked in yellow because they are not extra entities. Rather, they are extra properties of the entities that have already been highlighted. I've not shown here the percepts of the wood particles that make up the chair simply because they're difficult to draw. This panpsychist universe is more than a mere abstraction. Every particle experiences, therefore it is, to misquote Descartes. But because they cannot think, we have to do this on their behalf. Panpsychism alleviates many of the difficulties of the mind-body problem, but some remain. For example, how does agency relate to physical causation? And this motivates the next change. In Micro-Idealism, or my specific variant Pan-Idealism, the ontology is reversed, as is shown in yellow. Now what fundamentally and concretely exists are minds. Such minds have been characterized earlier. This is a huge metaphysical shift. Whereas before everything was grounded in the physical, now everything is fundamentally grounded in mind. In Pan-Idealism, the physical world is, by definition, the best possible synthesis of mathematical structural information taken from the percepts of all minds. It's rather like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. The physical world is entirely secondary to the fundamental ontology. This is true even for the so-called fundamental entities of completed physics. Nonetheless, it remains concretely and objectively real. Given all the jigsaw pieces, there's only one valid picture that can be made.
Moreover, the physical world is a mathematical abstraction. It's an abstraction in the literal sense of removing experiential qualities such as pain and retaining structural information. But Pan-Idealism is realistic. It doesn't claim that the physical world is an abstraction in the figurative sense of being a mere notion. Take an electron, for example, and suppose that our scientific knowledge of it is complete and correct. In terms of its physics, an electron has a perfect, complete mathematical description. And this indeed is what it is, insofar as it is a physical object. But the pan-idealist claim is that an electron is fundamentally and in essence a mind. This procedure is an entirely mathematical synthesis. Structures within percepts highlighted yellow are geometrical objects. The optimal synthesis is given by some mathematical rule, and the physical world is a mathematical object.
For time, we follow the same general procedure. We suppose that minds have percepts of a certain nature, and we derive world lines and hence time in terms of these percepts. Shown here are the world lines of two entities, red and blue. Time is going up the page. Red successive percepts are A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and blue successive percepts are P, Q, C, D, E, R, S. Their initial percepts are dissimilar. At the bottom of the sketch, red's percepts A and B are nothing like blue's percepts P and Q. And likewise, red and blue's final percepts are dissimilar. At the top of the sketch, red's percepts F and G are nothing like blue's percepts R and S. But in the middle, their percepts are very similar, and this is symbolized by the lettering.
To give the simplest possible example, suppose two people come together briefly to look at a digital clock. Percepts C are of the clock's display changing from 0 to 1. Percepts D are of the clock's display changing from 1 to 2. And percepts E are of the clock's display changing from 2 to 3. Big C and little c and so on are not quite identical because the clock is seen from two different viewpoints. The two streams of experience then move apart.
More accurately, full percept C is William James's specious present BCD. It contains a memory of at least one previous event and anticipations of one or more future events. It's difficult to show all such full percepts because their overlaps would confuse the sketch. Full percepts exist at the foundational level of Pan-Idealism, so it's appropriate to highlight them in yellow. We can use these full percepts to synthesize the world lines and hence derive the structure of time. Physical time is thus synthesized from subjective time. This was first proposed by John Foster in his book The Case for Idealism. The second challenge is that of holism. This comes in two parts. The first is that of global fundamental entities. Perhaps there are fundamental entities that are universe-wide in scope. David Chalmers says, for example, quantum mechanics invokes wave function properties that in general are not possessed by single particles, but rather by systems of particles, and perhaps ultimately by the universe as a whole. In Pan-Idealism, everything physical, including all physical functions, are a mathematical synthesis. In principle, the wave function of the universe, psi, is synthesized in the same way as space-time itself, although the process would be somewhat more complicated, as we only have very indirect access to psi. The second problem of holism is that fundamental entities might not exist. David Chalmers says that, in addition, it's sometimes suggested that there may be no lowest or smallest level of entities in physics, but an infinite chain of ever smaller entities. This viewpoint is held by very few scientists, and it is difficult to see how it could ever be proven, even though it might be true. Here, it is open to the pan-idealist to deny that our universe rests upon turtles all the way down. Before answering David Chalmers' final two challenges, I must give more specific detail of the physics and dynamics of pan-idealism. Physics in pan-idealism has several requirements.
Because our intention is to describe the correct objective physics of the universe, usually called completed physics, physics in pan-idealism must be consistent with contemporary physics, which is our best current insight into objective physics.
And it must have a clear ontology. Not all interpretations of quantum mechanics have this. It must have a unified description at all scales. Now, it's not immediately clear that our universe actually has this property. But clearly, if pan-idealism so far described is to have any chance of success, then this is an essential requirement. It must explain goings-on in the universe. Not every interpretation of quantum mechanics does this very clearly. I'm thinking of many worlds. These requirements lead us to adopt an objective collapse interpretation of quantum mechanics. These exist in several variants. I'll use Ghirardi-Rimini-Weber, or GRW for short, here, although other objective collapse interpretations are perfectly fine. To find the true individuals in pan-idealism, we factorize the wave function of the world as much as possible. Big psi equals alpha 1 times alpha 2 times alpha 3, and so on. No alpha is significantly entangled with any of the others, and no alpha can be further disentangled. The word significantly refers to a trivial mathematical technicality, which I explain in my book. Intrinsically, each alpha I is a mind, a true individual, consistent with the holistic nature of consciousness. And because we'll be dealing with dynamics, I sometimes call these individuals Agents. As an objective collapse occurs, this changes psi, giving rise to a modified factorization. We'll look at this in detail next. How does dynamics in Pan-Idealism work? Here we have a sketch of the universe at cosmic time, big T. Psi 0 is the initial quantum state of the universe before any collapse events have occurred. That's at the bottom of the screen. The black dots are collapse or localization events, and taken together, the past light cones of these events mark the cosmic past of the universe, which is drawn in brown. The boundary of this region is the cosmic present, which I've labeled now. Blue is the cosmic future, which is still open to various possibilities. Psi t is the current wave function of the universe. It is derived from psi 0 after all the collapse events marked by the black dots have occurred. Individually, and ignoring all others, each agent attempts to land its particles in the future. Each agent must do this consistent with psi t, the wave function of the universe, and also with its own state of entanglement. In the sketch, there are 6 agents which are free particles. On the right, there are 3 agents which are entangled pairs, and on the left, there's an entangled triplet, and also an entangled quartet. But entanglements can be much bigger than this. Which particle landings succeed and which fail? This is done at the level of individual particles and ignoring agents. The rule is, any landing attempt which is in the future light cone of any other will fail. These have been marked with the red crosses on the diagram. All other landing attempts succeed, and these have been marked with the green dots. The reason for this rule is that the successful landings will have disturbed the wave function, and therefore the unsuccessful landing attempts are no longer valid. We join the green dots together by their past light cones to form a new now, and I've relabeled the previous now just now. We can see that this picture is analogous to the situation at cosmic time t. But because of the successful localizations, the wave function has changed somewhat, and this implies that the set of agents has also changed somewhat. I'll replay this sequence briefly so you can review it. Cosmic time t. Each agent attempts to act. Cosmic time t+1. You can go back to review this.
There are several advantages to this dynamics. First, this is a plausible model of competing agents attempting to act in the world. Some attempts partially succeed while others fail. Second, the world line of a long-lived entity is somewhat analogous to a pearl necklace. We don't have a single agent that exists over an extended period of time. Instead, the world line of an entity is recognized as being a sequence of closely related agents. For example, a rabbit exists over time. It hops from one location to another, ingesting food and excreting. Each moment of its existence is an entangled state. Moreover, this state is very closely related to prior and subsequent states.
Third, the dynamics gives a natural, wafer-thin, space-like foliation of the universe, and it gives a natural, objective cosmic time. The increments of cosmic time are minuscule. For example, Tim Mauldin estimates that, according to GRW, About 10 trillion localization events occur within a human body per second. This estimate takes account of localizations due to electrons alone. It excludes other particles and also excludes interactions with the environment. The dynamics gives a reasonable process view of reality, in which the past of the universe is fixed, but the future remains open. The fact that the universe is 13.8 billion years old can be expressed straightforwardly. The cosmic time now is 13.8 billion years. Contrast this with the convoluted and implausible explanation that the adherents of, say, many worlds must give for this fact. The third challenge to Pan-Idealism is that of causal and dispositional properties. How can these be grounded in mental facts? I'll discuss causation first. As we've just seen, in Pan-Idealism, will is the only form of causation. So-called physical laws are no more than abstract mathematical descriptions of which events follow other events. These laws might either be probabilistic or deterministic.
As there is no physical causation, there's no problem of causal overdetermination. And so there's no possibility that mind is causally impotent, technically called epiphenomenalism. In contrast, any metaphysical system which includes physics within its foundational ontology has this latter problem.
Here's John Searle as an agent.
The current mantra is the physical world is causally closed. Well, you want to watch and see how consciousness makes a difference to the physical world. I decide to raise my arm and the damn thing goes up.
John Searle perceives that his arm is down. He wills his hand to go up. He then perceives that his arm is above his head.
As for his audience, they first perceive his arm is down, and then above his head.
According to Pan-Idealism, the entire fundamental ontology of the world consists of such subjective first-person percepts. But there isn't a fundamental physical world as perceived by an imaginary third person. Instead, in Pan-Idealism, the physical world is, by definition, the optimal synthesis of structural information taken from the percepts of all minds. This is the second-person viewpoint. In everyday speech, this is also commonly known as the intersubjective viewpoint. Hedemorch's theory of agency is similar to that of Pan-Idealism. Here it is as described by David Chalmers. Morch has argued for a phenomenal powers view, on which phenomenal states are, or metaphysically ground, certain causal powers or dispositions. For example, the experience of pain might ground a disposition to avoid certain situations. And she gives another example. The phenomenal state without the power is inconceivable and metaphysically impossible, even if the power without the phenomenal state is conceivable and possible. A pan-idealist response. The entirety of the physics of any concretely existing world can only be based on a mentalistic foundation, and agency is the only form of causation. Therefore, the final clause in red is also metaphysically impossible. Even something as inconsequential as a molecule completely lacking in mind is inconceivable. If you try to imagine it, then you're thinking of nothing other than a mathematical abstraction. The burden on those who deny this is to explain what gives a zombie molecule its reality. We now turn to dispositions to act in Pan-Idealism. How do an agent's dispositions manifest themselves physically? My answer is that the wave function alpha t of an individual agent at cosmic time t encodes its behavioral dispositions at that time. This is in the context of the totality of its environment, which is encoded in the wave function of the universe at that time. How does a creature develop ever more sophisticated repertoires of behavior over the course of its lifetime? At cosmic time t+1, the amended agent, denoted alpha prime t+1, has slightly different dispositions. This agent is recognizably the same creature because it contains nearly the same particles at nearly the same locations. Strictly speaking, this is because its wave function at time t+1 is almost equal to its wave function at time t. So, over its lifetime, and over countless attempted willful acts, many of which will be mostly or entirely unsuccessful, the creature can develop its repertoire of behaviors. The final challenge to Pan-Idealism is that of the combination problem. In part, Pan-Idealism was developed in order to meet this challenge, so we would expect it to cope reasonably well. David Chalmers divides the combination problem for Pan-Idealism, and more generally for Micro-Idealism, into three subproblems.
The subject combination problem asks, how do micro-subjects combine together in order to yield macro-subjects? The answer given by a pan-idealist is that a macroscopic subject is also fundamental. Moreover, it is one single thing. Specifically, it is one entangled system of microsubjects. This gives a solution to the subject combination problem. Entanglement is a well-understood physical process, and there is no need to invoke any mysterious radical emergence.
There's a caution here. Previously, I've been assuming that a macrosubject is a single center of consciousness, and microsubjects have been dissolved within the entanglement. But it's far more likely that each microsubject remains a center of experience in its own right, even when entangled with others.
For example, while Searle is raising his hand, numerous white blood cells are pursuing bacteria in his arm. It's plausible that these cells and the bacteria are subjects in their own right. They carry out their task heedless of the large movement. Searle, as a macro-subject, is unaware of these minutiae. His stream of consciousness is akin to that of the managing director of a large company, and the white blood cells are akin to workers.
According to Pan-Idealism, there's a fact of the matter about which of a creature's subsystems remain agents in their own right. But the theory would have to be refined in order to determine this. A good theory of degrees of entanglement for complex systems doesn't exist today. For many purposes, it's sufficient to regard a creature as one single agent. The structure combination problem asks, how does microphysical structure yield macro-experiential structure? This isn't fully solved, but it's plausible that a solution is possible. This is because in Pan-Idealism, all structural physical facts can be fully reduced to mathematical structures within the percepts of minds. The qualitative combination problem asks, how do the qualities, for example, redness and pain, of microscopic entities yield qualities in macroscopic entities? In Pan-Idealism, microqualities certainly exist within the percepts of microentities, but how they relate to macroqualities is unknown. No one has made any progress with this problem. Here are a couple of combination problems of my own. First, the evolutionary combination problem asks, how did life arise naturally on Earth and evolve? Second, the biological development combination problem asks, how do individual creatures develop naturally from fertilized eggs to adults? Note carefully that I recognize that evolutionary and developmental biology give satisfactory answers to these two problems when we exclude mind. My point here is to explain these problems naturalistically when we include mind, that is to say, in terms of Pan-Idealism. The global dynamics of Pan-Idealism seems to make both evolution and individual development plausible. This requires minimal change in the way the physics of these disciplines is understood. The only requirement is an objective collapse interpretation of quantum mechanics. Here are some more details about evolutionary and developmental biology. The first topic is appropriateness. Microbiology gives an excellent account of how, given a specific initial condition, a biological process will produce a specific result. For example, given a strand of mRNA as input, a ribosome will reliably translate it to produce a particular known protein. But in order for an organism to survive, every biological process in every cell must take place at the appropriate moment. How this happens is little understood. One must investigate the entire organism in terms of objective physics, so far as this is known to us today. In my view, we must investigate it as an entangled quantum system. Studying entanglement gives a rational way to explore the holism and appropriateness that are characteristic of an organism's behavior. This method would lead to a new rational theory of biological organicism. The second topic is fitness. According to Pan-Idealism, the objective state alpha of an agent, in the context of its environment psi at given time t, must give the exact objective measure f of its fitness at that moment. Though we can't measure f in practice, it's of theoretical importance. This is because it's based on the agent's exact physical state, insofar as this might be knowable, and on the agent's propensities to act. This theoretical fitness f is exact. It isn't based on the creature's phenotype or genotype alone, and it is f that nature acts upon in the struggle for existence. As is standard, in a group of creatures belonging to the same species, evolution works on the group's average fitness. Over generations, this process gives rise to adapted creatures with improved abilities to behave appropriately in a range of environments. But evolution doesn't act only on a creature's overt behaviors, say to escape from predators. It also acts on every detail of its interior behaviors, say the ability of each and every cell in the creature to produce the optimal mixture of proteins for its given circumstances. This pan-idealist understanding of a creature as an entangled system also helps to show how, in principle, it can form its own brain and mind, seemingly from nothing, as it develops from an egg to an adult.
That's all for now. I hope you enjoyed the video. Bye.